Anybody got them all 16 yet? Not necessarily. I love it when that happens. It's like, oh, there it is. Give you just a minute or two, and then I'll give them to you. See how many you can get. Put it that way. See how many you can get. How many you have, Dan? Well, there's some easy ones. Revelation, Judges, Lamentations, and Numbers should be fairly obvious. There's another fairly obvious one. Job. What's that? Job, yeah. You only need 10 more. Kings is in the second line. Second. That's James. He's at Kings. He's looking for Kings. Pastor, do you want one? Oh. Does your health insurance cover burns, Tim? Peter. PETA is not in the Bible. Peter is in there, believe it or not, if that helps. All right, I'm gonna have to stop you here. I'll give you another 60 seconds. Amos. Okay, Titus is in there. Tim, did you find Titus? Titus was the last one I found. It was one of the harder ones. I thought it was a harder one. Mm-hmm. Did you find Esther? Esther is in there. That's a harder one. If you got that, you're pretty close. You probably have most of them.
That one's difficult because of its orientation.
It is.
As soon as
What is orientation?
It does help when I tell you what ones are there. If you try to go without knowing which ones out of the 66, you're trying to find 16. That's how I did it. What's that? Cheater. I didn't help you. No, I didn't. There's 16. All right, 30 seconds.
Are there any that actually encompass 3 words?
Yes. Titus does. There's several that are 2. All right, does anybody have all 16? No? 15. Who has anybody have more than 13? No? All right, Lauren's got the most so far then.
No, we doesn't count.
Well, it does say it usually takes a minister to find some of them. All right, I'll give them to you. Mark is in the first line. Remark. Second line, Lulu kept is Luke, L-U-K-E, Luke. Then people look kings so, kings. The end of looking and the beginning of so, kings. And then so hard for facts, acts. And for the others, it was a revelation. Some were in a jam especially, James, J-A-M-E-S, jam especially. Since the names of the books were not capitalized, but the truth, Ruth, finally struck home to numbers of our readers. To others, it was a real Job. And we wanted to be Amos. Fascinating few moments for you. Yes, there. E-S-T-H-E-R. Yes, there. Esther. That was one of the harder ones. There will be some really easy one to spot, but others may require judges to help them. I will quickly admit it usually. Titus. T-I, the end of admit, and then it, and then usually. Titus. Takes a minister to find one of them, and there will be loud lamentations when it is found. A little lady says, Hebrews, a cup of tea, so that she can concentrate, brothers. See how well you can compete, relax, Peter. Compete, relax, Peter. Now, for there are really 16 names of books of the Bible in this paragraph. That should be all 16. So, Mark, Luke, Kings, Acts, Revelation, James, Ruth, Numbers, Job, Amos, Esther, Judges, Titus, Lamentations, Hebrews, and Peter. I thought that was fun. I thought that was a lot of fun. My dad and I were sitting over there. My dad and I, we found them all between the two of us, and we didn't have the list. It took us about 20 minutes probably. Titus was the one we had the hardest time. Titus was our last one we found. I thought Titus, Amos, and Esther were one of the harder ones to get. So, all right, Matthew chapter 7. Matthew was not in there. Matthew chapter 7. Yeah, he wasn't in there. There was a few I thought, man, that would be easy to put in if you could figure it out. You know, I thought maybe, but you look for all the shorter names of the Bible in the Bible to see if you could find them. So, John was not in there, believe it or not. Well, I'm sure somebody's done it. If I looked it up, I could find it. Matthew chapter 7, though. We want to get back into our study in the book of Matthew, looking at the Sermon on the Mount here. We're going to hopefully finish this up within the next week. And then we're going to talk Matthew chapter 8 and 9, our messianic miracles. We're going to talk about Christ's miracles here, that next section. So I'm looking forward to getting to that next section, I should say. But we're going to keep moving here. Matthew chapter 7 and verses 7 through 11. As we left off a little bit before that. We finished verse 6, give not that which is holy unto dogs, neither cast ye your pearls before swine, lest they trample them under their feet and turn again and rend you. That was a whole point in and of itself. It's kind of a small point that Christ put in there. And then we're going to, and we talked about how it's a warning against spending too much time or effort trying to convince someone who does not want to listen. Okay? Now, ought we to spend our time trying to convince the gainsayers? Yeah. But there is a balance. You can waste time. And we want to be wise as serpents, harmless as doves. We want to learn when we're using our time wisely and when we're beginning to waste our time. And if somebody is taking up all your time out on the bus route and you don't get to see the other children or those who are faithful, then you have to learn when to cut the conversation short and get to those who are faithful, get to those who are going to come. You can't spend all your time on the ones that don't. And believe it or not, and I think Pastor will agree with you, oftentimes it's the ones that aren't faithful that want to keep all your time. You know, it's the ones that don't want to listen, that you try to spend most of your time trying to convince, and then you feel like, yeah, I wasted all of that. So you have to be careful. And I'm not saying you shouldn't try. Okay, don't get me wrong. We definitely should, but we have to be wise in our usage of our time. It's also a warning about yoking together in ministry with what we call nominal Christians or false teachers. Okay, cast not your pearls before swine. It's a warning against hitching our wagon with those who are, lowering our standards to try to hitch with somebody who is more popular. Okay? We're not going to lower our standards. We're not going to lower our music standards to get a crowd. Okay? We're not going to do those type of things. So it's a warning against casting our pearls before swine. We're not going to do that. And thirdly, it's a warning against receiving unsaved people into church membership. Okay, we have to be careful. The church ought to be very, very careful about who is allowed to join. Okay, they should not be unsaved. They should be saved. So we need to be very careful. So we talked about that, and that was several weeks ago, so a little reminder. And then starting in verse 7 and moving on, we're going to talk about how Christ has encouraged men to seek things from God. Encouragement to seek things from God, verses 7 through 11. Let's read it and we'll pray, and we better get moving here this morning. It says, ask, and it shall be given to you. Seek, and ye shall find. Knock, and it shall be opened unto you. For everyone that asketh receiveth, and he that seeketh findeth, and to him that knocketh it shall be opened. Or what man is there of you, whom if his son asks bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks a fish, will he give him a serpent? Tim, you weren't born when this was written, right? Just saying. If ye then, being evil, know how to give good gifts unto your children, how much more shall your Father which is in heaven give good things to them that ask it? So seeking things from God. Let's pray. We'll get going. Sorry, Tim. Lord, we thank you for the time we had this morning. Thank you for the fun we're able to have together, Lord. But I pray now as we begin to study your word, you'd help us to be serious, help us to learn to be able to seek things from you and get things from you that we ought to get, Lord. Help us as we study your word this morning. Be with pastors who preaches throughout the day. Lord, be with the other Sunday school teachers upstairs as they deal with the children. Give them wisdom and all that they say and do. In your name I pray. Amen. We're just going to see a couple things here from these few verses, and then we'll move on. Make sure of course they're not. Notes are in order. But a few things here that we want to look at. We want to see God's wonderful character. Look at the character of God shown in this passage. And I know we could talk about prayer, but we've already talked about prayer quite a bit. So we're going to look at this a little bit different. And we often see this as a prayer. But here Christ is encouraging us to seek things from God. And we say something about God's character in these verses. Can somebody name some of those things? What are things we know about God's character? Not even necessarily from these verses. We'll give you those. But what do we know of God's character? What is God? Who is God? He's holy. He's the thrice holy God. What else is he? He's faithful. He's just. Good. He is good. That was ironic. Righteous. Okay, that's another one I have. How about the omnis? What is Christ? Or what is God? He's omniscient, he's omnipresent, he's omnipotent, right? He's all-powerful. He's everywhere. He's all-knowing. Okay, those are those three things. He's almighty. Almighty, omnipotent God. So we know these things about God, but this passage shows us a little bit more. What do we see about God here in Matthew chapter 7? What does he describe, or what does he use to compare him? What's that? A father. What is God for us? He's a tender, caring Father. He's a tender, caring Father. He loves us. He desires not only to save us, but then when we are saved, to help us. And he invites us, we talked about it before at the beginning of this Sermon on the Mount, to approach him in prayer and to ask of him. He says in this verse, ask, knock, seek. is very different from the God of this world. He has no love. He has no compassion. He has no mercy. He doesn't care. He offers things, but in the end, we ask, Satan offers things freely. Here, I'll give you this. I'll give you this. But what in the end is poison, or it's addictive, or it's destructive. God He wants to give us good things. He just wants us to seek Him. He wants us to look for Him. The God of this world, Satan, his promises are lies, and his invitations bring destruction. But God's character is that of a loving Father. He wants us to come to Him. Okay? As a father, I want my children to come for me. In fact, and maybe not consciously, or maybe because I've been trained it, but I'm trying to teach them that they need to come to me. Okay? We ought to train our children to ask. I'm not going to do it for them. They need to ask. Right? If Annie needs help, or if I see William struggling with something, sometimes I just sit there and smile. Because he expects me to come help him, and I'm perfectly willing to. But guess what he needs to do? Just simply ask. Daddy, help. That's all it takes. Especially with the girls, right? It's easier when a girl says, Daddy, help. Then it's like, whoop, right there. Hey, Daddy, can you help me eat this donut? Whoop, right there. Okay? They need to ask. They need to ask. So train them to ask. Because why? Because it's God's character that He wants us to ask. He wants us to seek Him. Okay? We can't assume the help. He wants us to ask. He wants us to come to Him. And He is willing to help us. He loves us. He desires to help us. But He wants us to ask. It shows His character. Secondly, it shows something about us. What's our responsibility in it? To seek. Yeah, it's that simple. Our responsibility is to seek. Let me give out some verses here. 2. Jeremiah 29:13. Somebody read, Pastor? Lauren, if you would find Acts 26:27. You were a little slow on the draw there. Acts 17:26 and 27. And Pastor Jeremiah 29:13. Our responsibility is to seek God. He says, ask and it shall be given unto you. Seek and ye shall find. Knock and it shall be opened unto you. And then there's promises along with that. But our responsibility simply is to do those things. How often do we avoid that, though? We have a need, and the last thing we do is go to God. The first thing we do is run to our bank, or we run to our friend, or we run to our coworker, when the first thing ought to be to seek God. Tim?
But He's more than willing to help you get there.
Sure. Tests and trials, are everyday part of life.
He doesn't just say, you know better, and let us squander in our own.
Sometimes there's trials put there just to see if we'll ask. Pastor, Jeremiah 29:13. Well, there's some requirements there, isn't it? So that verse shows a little bit more about the asking and seeking. Okay, you shall seek me with all of your heart. That's when you're going to find the answer. I like Jeremiah there, because it shows a little bit in depth how far we need to go. We need to seek. We need to search with all of our heart. Acts 17:26 and 27. Dyslexic. It's good for a driver. Yes, sir.
And hath made one blood all nations of men for to dwell on all the face of the earth, and hath determined the times before appointed and the bounds of their habitation, that they should seek
He's not far, right? But we should seek the Lord. We need to seek the Lord. It's not like it takes a lot, but we need to earnestly desire it, search with all our heart, and we need to seek Him. Okay? Our job, our responsibility is simply to seek God. We need to seek God. Third thing we see here, I'll keep it moving. We need to see the importance of persistence. Okay, a couple big words, but the importance of persistence. Matthew verse 7 and 8. It says, "For everyone that asketh receiveth, and he that seeketh findeth, and him that knocketh it shall be opened." The verb tense, don't shut off. Okay, get our English lessons out here. Is continuous. Okay, for everyone that asketh. The idea is you continually. It's not ask once and you're done. But it's ask and ask and ask. Or seek. Not how your kids look for something that you tell them to go find. Didn't see it, Dad. Can't find it. And you go into the room. It's right there. I saw it within 3 seconds of looking. How could you not find it in the last 20 minutes? Sorry, had that last night. It's on the top of my head. Hey, William, go find this. I can't find it anywhere, Dad. Well, you've been looking for 10 minutes now. I guess I'll go help you. And I find it in 2 seconds. Where were you looking? Because it's right there in the open, there for you to see. Kind of like James in that thing we had. We're kings. It's right there. Why couldn't you find it? It was right there. He couldn't see it. But the idea is to continually seek Him. If we knock, we keep on knocking, God will answer. It's like, I've seen this at doors sometimes in soul winning too. Tap, 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 tap. Oh, nobody's home. Next one. Come on now. Nobody's home. Gotta as Tiffany says, a pastor knocks. He knocks like the police. Like bam, bam, bam. I used to have a guy we went door to door with, and this is maybe too far, but he used to take his keys and stick them between his knuckles, and then find glass, find a window. And that rap is really, really loud. I thought for sure one of these days he would shatter somebody's window and we would get shot at or something. But he would take his keys, stick it in between there, and then that's how he knocked. And guess what? We always got an answer. For some reason, people came running to that door. They're like, "What?" Oh, it's a church. You got excited at least a little bit to start with. But we need to keep on knocking. God will answer. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right? Insanity. Same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. And we talked about that earlier when we talked about when the disciples asked, "Teach us to pray." We talked about how it's not vain repetition, but we need to be truly seeking. So, but continually with persistence in prayer. We should pray until God answers, or until He makes it clear that it is not His will to answer. But either way, you're getting an answer. Pray until you get an answer. If you don't have an answer, continue to pray. Paul did this in 2 Corinthians chapter 12. Look there real quick with me. 2 Corinthians, quickly with me. Chapter 12. Verses 7 through 10. "And lest I should be exalted above measure through the abundance of revelations." He's going to talk about a thorn in the flesh. And Paul had abundance of revelations from God, didn't he? Every book that he wrote in the New Testament is a revelation from God. He saw things from God. In fact, he went out into the wilderness and was shown or taught by God. One of the requirements for being an apostle is you had to be taught by Christ. Paul was, believe it or not. He went out in the wilderness and he was taught. But lest I should be exalted above measure through the abundance of revelations, there was given to me a thorn in the flesh, the messenger of Satan to buffet me. Imagine that. Not only just a thorn in the flesh, but he describes that it was a messenger of Satan. Wonder how persistent that thorn was. Wonder how hard that was. But a messenger from Satan to buffet me, lest I should be exalted above measure. For this thing I besought the Lord thrice, that it might depart from me. And he said unto me, my grace is sufficient for thee. My strength is made perfect in weakness. Anybody else have a red letter Bible? What color are those words in yours? They're red. Well, what does the red signify? They're the words of Christ, right? That's what it is in mine anyway. So who told him that? Christ did. Most gladly, therefore, I rather glory in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Therefore, I take pleasure in infirmities and reproaches and necessities and persecutions and distresses for Christ's sake. For when I am meek, then I am made strong. See, Paul went through the same thing. He continually sought God until he got an answer. Probably wasn't the answer he was hoping to get, was it? But he sought him thrice. He sought him thrice until he got an answer. I don't know what the time period was. I don't know. I wonder if it was all in one day, or if it was all in 1 month, or if it was all in 1 year. It doesn't tell us. But 3 times he prayed for it. Twice he didn't get an answer. But he prayed until he got one. God requires persistence to test our faith. Hebrews chapter 11. Right? We've been here before. Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 6. It says this, but without faith it is impossible to please him, for he that cometh to God. What tense is cometh? Compare it to where we were at in Matthew chapter 7. Okay, and it says, ask and it shall be given to you, seek and ye shall find, knock and it shall be opened unto you. For everyone that asketh, receiveth, and he that seeketh, findeth, and to him that knocketh, it shall be opened. You notice the similarities there between Hebrews chapter 6 and Matthew 7, verse 8, Hebrews 11, verse 6, and Matthew 7. For he that cometh to God, that's continually. It's continually. Let's believe that he is. We need to continually. Requires persistence on our part to get answer to prayer. It requires persistence. I remember we're even past the point where there are things that go beyond just praying. Sometimes God requires more. We talked about the fasting. Sometimes God wants more than just prayer. Sometimes things come about and they're beyond just prayer. It requires prayer and fasting. And God requires a little bit more of us. So we need to be careful. We need to learn to seek from God. Verse 9 says, or what man is there of you, whom if his son asks bread, will give him a stone? This is what I was teasing Tim about. I could see you doing that. Like, Daddy, can I have some bread? Here's a stone. Suck on that. Okay. Can you picture yourself doing that? I mean, is anybody else with me? Raise your hand. Okay, I have this whole side of the buildings with me. Okay, so I'm not alone in that. Can anybody picture me doing that? Okay, see, you're not the only one. I thought of myself too. I don't know if I would go so far as to give him a snake, though. Just because I can't. No. Yeah, that snake wouldn't last long, or I wouldn't be in the same county. For if he asks a fish, we'll give him a serpent. If ye then, being evil, know how to give good gifts to your children. Listen to that. Even the evil know how to give good gifts to their children. Now I got to get out my new notes. How much more then will God give to us? How much more shall your Father which is in heaven give good things to them that ask? Does God want to give us good things? Absolutely he does. He does. We just got to learn to ask. Sometimes I think we just go, I'm going to go get it. And we've started off wrong because we said, I'm going to go get it. Rather than just saying, hey, God, will you give it to me? It sounds simple, right? It sounds like that's too easy. But according to what I see, God wants us to seek Him. And He wants to give us good things. Now, next point. The definition of good. What's good? God is good. So what then will God give? It says, how much more shall your Father which is in heaven give good things to them that ask Him? Interesting. So what is good? What does God want to give us? His will. That's good. I left it open. I left it blank because I just wanted you to come up with what you could think of. The necessities. Yeah. What else? My mind's racing. I can think of things. What about you? It's righteousness. Grace. That was a good one. Mercy. Help. You need help? He wants to give it to you. It's good. Comfort. How about conversation? When I start thinking of these things, let me give you an insight into the psyche of Jason Landis. Okay, don't... Caleb, get back in here! Oh, yeah, that's a little scary, I know. It's a deep well. You might get lost. I'm just saying. I start at the beginning, and I kind of work my way through what I know of the Scriptures. And why did God create man in the first place? To fellowship with Him. To walk with Him in the cool of the day. He wanted somebody to fellowship. So what is good? Fellowship with God. Communication with Him. So that just shows you that's... So, and then continue your way through the Scriptures. What else does He want from us? Or what is good for us? Think of that same story. What next is good for man? Yeah, I don't think we got to that point yet. Before that. If just talking about the story of Adam and Eve, companionship. Yeah. Whoso findeth a wife findeth a good thing. Yeah. Some of us very good. So He wants good things of us. Salvation is good. Yes. Obedience. Yeah. All kinds of stuff. Work. Ha! Because what was Adam doing? Naming the animals. He was naming them. They came before him. Yeah, and caring for the garden. Work. Work is good. It's good four-letter word. So work. So and you could go on and on. But if ye then, being evil, know how to give good gifts unto your children, how much more shall your Father which is in heaven give good things to them that ask? It's a rhetorical question, right? How much more? Above all that we ask or think. I don't know about you, but I can imagine some pretty big things. So one of the bus kids was telling me they saw a Lamborghini, or somebody was, who was that, Caleb? They saw a Lamborghini the other day in Lancaster. Kaylee was telling me. They saw a Lamborghini. Like in Lancaster. Hope they weren't driving down some of those streets. Yeah. It's worth more than the city, probably. But He wants us to give us good things. Now moving on, verse 12. It says, therefore all things whatsoever ye would that men should do unto you, do ye even so to them, for this is the law of the prophets. So the next thing is what? What is the next called? I think you know it. I want to see if you can give it to me. We're almost out of time anyway, so. What is it? It says, therefore, all things whatsoever, it's a one-verse kind of point here. Verse 12, therefore, all things whatsoever ye would that men should do unto you, do ye all, Even so to them, for this is the law and the prophets. What is it? What is that called? Bet your Sunday school kids can tell us. It's called the Golden Rule. That's what I was looking for. Yes, it is. It's the Golden Rule. That's what I wanted. It's the Golden Rule. This is the Golden Rule. We're making it simple. We're making it simple. Therefore, even I can understand it. Therefore, all things whatsoever you would that men should do to you, do ye to them. It's simply the Golden Rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Yeah, the law of sowing and reaping. Love thy neighbor as thyself. At the very beginning of the Sermon on the Mount, we talked about this one thing that kind of, it goes throughout it, but it was a general thing that happens in the Sermon on the Mount, or something that Christ was doing. What did he do to the law? He expanded it or made it more difficult. The Bible says, thou shalt, if you commit adultery with a woman, he says, thou look on a woman. And he said that, the law says, thou shalt not kill. He said, if you look on a man with hate, so he made it more intense. He made it, what did you say, Dan? How did you describe it? He expanded the law. He made it more difficult. Why? Because the law can't get us saved anyway. He wanted to show them that the law was simply there to show them their sin. What is he doing there? He's expanding it. They narrowed the view of neighbor. The Pharisees had taken the neighbor and said, well, I can easily do that. I'll just narrow the definition of neighbor. And Christ says, therefore, all things whatsoever that men should do unto you, do even so to them, for this is the law and the prophets. He said, all the Old Testament is distilled into this. Golden rule. It's that simple. And they couldn't even do that. They had to narrow it. They had to try to make it, their mind stricter. But really what they were doing is giving themselves an out to do whatever they wanted. And Christ said, no. That's not how it works. He said, because God is willing to give you good things that you ask. He says, therefore, okay, all things whatsoever you would mention to you, do so to them. Because God is willing to give us so much, shouldn't we be willing to give to others? Shouldn't we be willing to do for others? Jesus, others, then myself, if I even get that far. We're supposed to do it in that order. We need to be very, very careful that we don't get things out of order, because oftentimes what happens is, I'm going to take care of myself first. Then I'll take care of my narrow view of my neighbors. Oh yeah, by the way, there's God too. We have it completely backwards. We need to switch it around. We need to do what he tells us to do. Be good to our neighbors. Treat them like we would want to be treated. Enter ye in at the straight gate. I'm not going to have time to finish this, so I think what we'll do is end it here, and we'll look at that next. Verses 13 and 14 will be our next point. Then we'll talk about 15 through 23, and we will be getting very, very close to being done, chapter 7 and the Sermon on the Mount. Chapters 8 and 9, then we're going to deal with some of the miracles that Christ did. I'm looking forward to getting to that. I'll let you go here. Caleb, would you mind closing us in prayer?